Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 216. Awesome guest today, another college strength and conditioning coach that I have a ton of respect for. He's a former CSP intern who's had a few different stops in the SEC, does a great job, really on the player development side of things, but I also think one of the things that blew me away was just how well he really related to people during his internship. Really worked well with people from all walks of life. He's got a great, calm demeanor, excellent coach who's really spread his wings and does some awesome stuff in the industry. So excited to kind of share a little bit more about him and work through some of the complexities of college strength and conditioning and talk about how it's evolved over the last decade or so. And for a good one, enjoy. Today's episode is brought to you by Anchor Training. If you haven't heard of Anchor, you need to, because this is an equipment innovation that's disrupting the fitness, strength and conditioning, and rehabilitation industries in the best possible way. Anchor is an attachment that rigs up easily to power racks or support beams, and it can be also wall mounted. Once it's set up, you can do chops, lifts, rotational patterns, presses, rows, and a variety of arm care exercises. Basically, if you can do it on a functional trainer or conventional cable setup, you can do it on Anchor, but at a dramatically lower price and with much less space taken up. For these reasons, it's a perfect addition to baseball facilities and home gyms that may have limited space and budget. We have multiple units at both Cressey Sports Performance facilities and use them regularly with our athletes. Additionally, over the lifespan of the product, the maintenance costs are very low. We pay over $300 each year for parts and labors to replace cables on each of the functional trainers at our facility. Swapping it out for an Anchor cable costs about 1/6 that amount and as simple as shipping it back to the company who sends out a replacement. Perhaps most importantly, Anchor travels extremely light. You can throw it in a backpack or a suitcase and not even realize it's there. I know of coaches and players that are taking these units on the road to overcome under-equipped minor league weight rooms and hotel gyms. So when all is said and done, it saves space, money, and headaches while also offering the benefits of portability. To learn more, head to www.anchortraining and enter the coupon code Cressey at checkout to save 10% on your order. That's Anchor Training, ANCORE training.com, and the coupon code is Cressey, CRESSEY, to save 10% on your order. This has been a great addition to our training facilities, and I'm confident you'll find it equally beneficial. Today's guest is a certified strength and conditioning specialist in his 7th season as the University of Alabama's baseball strength and conditioning coach. Previously, he served in the same role at Auburn University from 2016 to 2018. Prior to his time at Auburn, he served as an intern at Cressey Sports Performance Florida in the fall of 2015. Before that, he was a strength and conditioning coach for Troy University baseball and softball from 2013 to 2015. He graduated from Troy University with his bachelor's in sports and fitness management in 2013 and his master's in sport and fitness management and exercise science in 2015. He played 2 seasons of college baseball at Lawson State Community College from 2010 to 2011. Please welcome to the show, Brett Price. Brett, it is awesome to have you. Thanks so much for taking some time.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Honored to be on here.
It's been really cool to follow your career progression from the days as an intern at CSP, but also seeing the cool stuff you guys do at Alabama. We've been fortunate to come down and have our staff spend some time with you guys, and just kind of like the word that keeps coming to my mind is synergy. Like everyone gets along, everybody works together, asking a lot of the right questions. It's a good environment down there. So I'm excited to kind of peel back the layers and learn a little bit more about how you guys attack things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, so let's talk. We're talking here, fall of 2025. You got your first exposure in college strength and conditioning back in 2014. And we'll talk a little about that, I think as we go. But I'm curious, how has the world of strength and conditioning changed, specifically with respect to baseball? And then maybe how do you feel like the average incoming athlete is either more or less prepared? Are they different now than they were in 2014?
Well, the strength and conditioning is vastly different. It feels like, I mean, there's obviously still some similarities, but it's kind of funny. Me and one of our interns actually put in my jump drive from Troy when we pulled out my folder and I was going through some of our old programs to kind of teach them some different things. And like, here's the first program I wrote. It was Troy men's tennis, and you pull it up and it's so much cringeworthy, like the stuff you were doing. And at the time it was, I thought it was the best possible thing we could do. We trained hard at it, but that's kind of growth, right? You learn, you implement, you make mistakes, and you look up 11 years later and it's like vastly different what you're doing. The biggest difference is obviously then we had no tech on the floor. At that point in time, the only thing we were tracking was volume intensity with pen and paper. And nowadays you finish a training session, and I mean the amount of data you can go back and look at from your, whether it's VBT sets or your force plate jumps or whatever it is that you implemented that day. There's just a lot more information to go back and assess to figure out how the session went, if guys are moving in the right direction. And back then, at least for me, being young in my career, it was a lot of, hey, we had a good day if they were able to do a little bit more weight, or whatever it might be. That's kind of how you evaluated it. So the kids are different, but they're also the same. I mean, the part that's the same is they're still very eager to achieve their goals. That these are Division I athletes that are serious about development. So from that standpoint, the kids have always been the same. That's always been a very enjoyable part. I would say they are a little bit more prepared on the strength side of things coming in. Back then, it wasn't super uncommon to maybe have a kid that had never been in the gym before, or stuff like that. Those days have become very rare. Like you don't see that instance very much anymore. Guys are coming in. There's just a lot more. I don't know if there's more high quality gyms or if it's just more information readily available for guys to have access to through podcasts like this or YouTube channels. And so it seems like they have a little bit more feel for the gym when they get here than maybe they did in years past. But ultimately, the kids are still the same. They still like to work. They still like to train, and that's what makes it fun about being in this position to help them get there.
Do you think that just the circumstances in college baseball have changed it that much? Right? It's just obviously like I think athletes are probably a little bit more transactional with respect to being able to like jump from program to program and
Yeah, for sure.
a lot more leverage coming into college.
Yeah.
Does that change like the underlying, I guess, motivation, or I guess that's just good recruiting is weeding those guys out that aren't there for the right reasons?
Yeah, it's definitely different. You know, that's a piece of it for sure. Once they get here and they're in your walls and you're getting into the daily training, like it doesn't feel different. It doesn't. I mean, there's still standards, there's still expectations, there's still all these non-negotiable things that you're going to hold them accountable to. Um, and once they're here, they're eager to work. Certainly, the recruiting conversations, I'm sure, are vastly different 11 years later.
Yeah,
But yeah, there's definitely a piece of that. But I mean, ultimately, once they get in your walls, and if you have good standards, and it's important to still have some continuity where you have older players that know the way and can kind of show the ropes a little bit to the new guys of, hey, this is how we're going to do things and all that. It helps that process big time because you do have a little more turnover than what you had in years past.
that's awesome. And you kind of hinted this a little bit before, is that players are more advanced. They're coming in with a higher training age, all that. I'm curious, how do you see the average incoming freshman at Alabama? What would you like to see? I joke that in our facility, like our job is to make college strength and conditioning coaches' jobs easier when players actually report. Like, what can the private sector do to help a guy like you hit the ground running with a player when he arrives in, July before his freshman year?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, movement quality always helps. Having just a good foundation of movement quality, understanding, just your basic movement patterns and how to do them correctly. I kind of joke and I tell high school kids this when we have our camps, but like I would, if you gave me the option to pick between a kid that's never been in the gym, but is a blank canvas versus a guy that has, put a lot of strength on top of some really bad dysfunctional patterns, I'll take the kid with the blank canvas 100 times out of 100 and feel confident being able to teach him how to move and get him strong in a pretty quick manner. It's just a lot harder to go back and a kid that's put a lot of brute strength on top of some dysfunction. That's a lot harder to fix than it is taking a guy that's just kind of getting into training and being able to get him going on the right path right out of Jump Street there. So, I mean, ultimately, but all that to say, if they in a perfect world they come here, they're already strong and fast and move great, and that makes it really easy. So, I think teaching them accountability, teaching them how to train, holding them to some standards, but then also, making sure keeping the main thing, right? Like what are they training for? Not chasing numbers and putting them in jeopardy and sending them here with, back issues or different things like that. Those are things we always kind of peel back the curtain on to figure out, what it is they've done in the past. And, credit to a lot of the places our guys have come from. They, recently it feels like they all have really good training backgrounds and that process, that, block zero plan that used to maybe take a little longer seems to go pretty quick.
That's good to know. And then maybe if you backtrack that even further, let's talk about a 15-year-old kid who's listening to this. They're trying to become an athlete, at your school. and potentially beyond, like what steps does that player take as a teenager? And I asked the same question of Chris Martin at LSU not long ago. Like if they want to become a championship caliber player at Alabama and really do well in the SEC, like what would you expect them to do earlier in their teenage years to really support that?
I would say take a deep dive into your development model. Like, is it just skill focused? Is there training involved? What's your nutrition look like? That, making sure that you're checking all those boxes, not just the skill box of playing year round. Obviously, to play at this level, you have to have a certain level of skill. So that's extremely important. But also, if you look across our league, the guys are pretty big and they're pretty fast, and the physical qualities are very important. And if you weigh 140 pounds and you're just playing year round and never stepping foot in the gym, like it's going to be hard to get to this level. Like you need all three. You need to evaluate those things and make sure you're playing solid. And then I think for those kids too, I tell these to our campers as well. Like nutrition is one of the easiest ways at that age to differentiate yourself a little bit. There's not a lot of kids at that age taking that stuff serious, getting up and making a protein shake and making sure they're getting breakfast in before they leave to go to school and packing a lunch and doing some different things to where that's an easy way to get a jump on some guys. And you come to camps and your exit belows are higher than theirs because you're a little more physical. All of a sudden, your name starts getting noticed a little bit more, whatever it might be. So it's a little bit of everything, but I would say, mostly evaluating what your development model is and making sure that you're checking the boxes that you need to check to give yourself the best chance to show up when you do go to these camps or showcase events.
I always tell kids, like, don't wait around for someone to teach you something you already know. Like you got to eat,
Exactly.
you got to drink plenty of water, you got to get to bed on time. Like all these things, they might not seem like absolute difference makers day to day, but when you stack them for months upon end and years, eventually in the high school area, like it can accelerate your development. You buy a lot of time.
Right. Before we get into supplements and meal timing, did you eat
Yeah.
breakfast and what time did you go to bed?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah.
So, but 100%.
So I probably a terrible lead into my next question, but we went from like the simple stuff, but now I want to ask about tech, right? And tech
Okay.
everywhere in strength conditioning and certainly in the baseball communities. Frankly, it's in everything. It's in tennis, it's in golf, you name it. What technologies do you leverage on a daily basis? And also, what are you curious about that you're not using that, you think could be a difference maker for you?
Yeah, we're fortunate here. We have our, at Alabama, we get our hands on a lot of cool tech, especially in the training realm. My boss, Coach Ballou, over at football, has brought in a ton of different pieces that we get access to since he's been here. Whether that's, we have the force plate data we're diving into like everybody else. We're, evaluating counter movement jump stuff and looking at interventions that, different ways to access and our bucket guys, profile guys, how can we make them a little bit better through evolved force plates and all that. We also have several 1080 sprints that we have access to that we're using. And then really the quantums are the things that kind of gotten my attention over the last couple of years that I've been diving into. So, honestly, like there's not more out there. And I don't want to sound bad when I say this, but there's not really anything else I want to get my hands on right now. It's more about taking what we have and continuing to kind of refine our process of what are we monitoring, why are we monitoring it, and is it driving adaptation in a positive way, and trying to streamline that process a little bit more versus continuing to add. I feel like we got a lot of stuff that we really need and that we can really implement, and we're going down the right track with how we want to use it, and it's just continuing to kind of refine that process.
I love that. I think so many people get just so caught up in collecting data for the sake of collecting data. It's like keeping up with the Joneses. They see
No
somebody
doubt.
else do it, but how does it all fit together? How does it drive training interventions? And then also, probably more importantly, how does it evaluate what you've already done? Like, did the intervention work or not?
100%. Yeah. I mean, you can't hide from the data either. It is what it is. So you have to be honest with it and assess it. And it's going to point you one way or the other. Guys are getting better. Guys are getting worse. If they're not improving, what is it? And you can get out in front of it and make some adjustments. And that's kind of goes back to that first question of how it's different now than 11 years ago was you were just kind of evaluating, or at least for me, you were evaluating it at the end of the fall when you were kind of doing some retesting on some strength of whether or not it was a good semester. And now you can kind of sit there and constantly evaluate and make adjustments and make changes. And we have a cool sports science team on campus. Derek Butler's a guy that I work with daily on some of that stuff to kind of go through that information and process it. And and make the adjustments to guys on the fly to make sure they're improving.
It's pretty wild to think that like probably 10 to 15 years ago, if you put 100 pounds on a guy's back squat, like it was job well done. And you might have actually made it
Heck
to
yeah.
like nowadays, that same guy could have back pain and be even slower than when he got to campus. And we just never had the tech to really tell us that was the case.
Well, and honestly, it was before I came down there and interned with you guys, and I was at Troy, and I just gotten handed over baseball, and we had a left-handed pitcher that could back squat, 450, 500 pounds or whatever it might be. And then I went out and watched him pitch, and he was throwing like 83 miles an hour. And that was kind of an aha moment with me, like, man, something's not adding up. And that's not always the case. That's a very, just an example, but there's way more to it than just, the adding 50 pounds to a back squat or whatever it is. And that's kind of when I started that whole journey of like, all right, I'm missing something. It's more than this, and I need to go figure out what that is.
In the vein of aha moments, what's something that you've changed your mind on over the last few years?
I think it's more of just being not as quite black and white as I used to be as a younger coach. I was good at math growing up, and I loved the idea of 2 + 2 = 4 and systems and everything operating in kind of black and white. And the more you're in this, you kind of realize you're going to have to live life in the gray area a little bit more. The answer is always it depends. Every guy's different. So I think just accepting that has helped me a little bit and just kind of change the way I view things, not trying to, just fit everybody into certain buckets or whatever it might be. So just, I mean, that's the biggest thing, honestly, probably the last 3 to 4 years is living a little more in the gray and understanding that everybody's different. Every year's different. Every team you have is a little bit different. Their needs change. And just not being so black and white with things.
I like that. In that same vein, and you're a progressive thinker, right? I know you always ask great questions when you were, a young coach, a decade or so ago. You're always looking for ways to get better. What's something that's rattling on your brain right now? I always joke like there's something that's keeping you up at 3 in the morning. Although you have young kids now, so it might be that too. But what are you excited to learn more about?
Yeah, strength conditioning thoughts are a lot better than dirty diapers at 3 a.m. But yeah, the quantums, I kind of hinted at that. The interventions of what we can use with that. We've made a lot of cool progress with some of the different assisted and resisted jump things you can do with the synchros and being able to overload some eccentric stuff and different things like that. I'm really curious about diving into more of how we can implement that on a rotational side of things. I've done a lot of some of our stuff we've done in the past, but like being able to use these to kind of surf the force velocity curve a little bit more from a rotational side and see if there's something in there that, maybe we've been missing on in years past. We've kind of started going down that rabbit hole a little bit. So, kind of using those to develop not only rotational power, but kind of like maybe for certain guys, maybe it's a little more of a strength thing and they have some isokinetic settings you can use and pairing that with some different med ball stuff to maybe create a little more adaptation there is something I'm really interested in. And so I've been working with some of our sports science guys over there to kind of figure out good ways to assess and maybe figure out, just like you would from a sprint velocity, load profile, can we do that rotationally somewhat and see if guys can maybe make some jumps that we've been leaving on the table.
Do you think it's even harder? Wasn't on my original list of questions, but do you think it's even harder to evaluate what works now? That there's a lot more just one and done college baseball experiences, right? Players on grad
Yep.
visas or players that are in the transfer portal. Is it actually hard to evaluate what works and what doesn't compared to what it was 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. I mean, getting guys in your program for an extended period of time isn't always the norm anymore. I had when I first got to Alabama, I had a kid, Drew Williamson. I trained him for 5 years here because of the COVID year. Will Hodo was a guy that I trained for. There's been several that I trained for 4 or 5 years, and that's not the same anymore. I mean, you could obviously had a huge runway for those guys, and you could see how they developed over time. I mean, I do think you can still go in and make some adjustments. Your process just has to be streamlined. It's got to be, one or two things that you really think might can help move the needle for that guy. That's a conversation with the athlete of like, how you get here. We got 1 year, man. What do you think you're missing? Based off some of the stuff we do and his input, like is all that adding up to the same thing? And then, all right, hey, let's get aggressive and go do that. And like if for certain guys too, it's also a little bit like you want to make sure they're on the field because they're coming here for a year to play. So you got to keep the main thing. The main thing is kind of like if the Yankees signed a guy, paid him a lot of money, you want to make sure they're out there to play every day. That's ultimately why they're coming into your program. So you want to find one or two things you can make them better at, and then go get it. We've had success doing that, bringing in some transfer guys, but also I'm thankful that we still bring in a good high school recruiting class that you can spend a lot of time with those guys. So it's the challenges are different, but yeah, it's just trying to find one or two things that you can improve on, and then go make a move on it. And yeah, it is a little bit harder to evaluate though in a shorter time frame, certainly.
You guys, I hinted at earlier, is like we've done these college visits, usually August, September for years with a variety of different schools. And our crew always loves going to Alabama. Obviously, like great Southern hospitality, cool football experience, all that stuff. It's always a highlight trip for them. But one of the biggest reasons is that I've heard this from like multiple coaches that have gone there. Like the collaboration is top notch, right? The conversations are better. Like you guys all push each other. Like so there's a lot of synergy across your coaching staff. What are some things that you guys do, in-house that, to basically make sure that you guys are working together to not leave any stone unturned?
Yeah, I mean the first piece of that, especially on the pitching side with some of those screens, is the continuity of me and Coach Jackson and Sean Stryker, our athletic trainer. We've been together as a team for 8 years now, so that's just a lot of time with each other. There's no egos there. We keep player developments at the center of attention, and we're all working as a village to try to make sure that happens. So no egos is a big piece of that. It's just, and you when you're with somebody for so long, and you kind of speak the same lingo, you start speaking the same language. I know, I can sit down and have a quick conversation with Coach Jackson about what he wants to improve with a guy's delivery, and then I could take that information and go run with it in the gym to try to maybe use some of those same cues with a med ball drill or a split squat or whatever it is he wants him to fill out there. And you're kind of hitting the same message from every different angle, so the guy's hearing it over and over again. And that helps, and that's ultimately what development is, right? We're all working towards the same goal. It's I'm the strength and conditioning coach, but ultimately my job is to help make them a better pitcher. Nobody's coming here to be a weight room All-American. Certainly we want to get bigger, faster, stronger, but if they're not getting better on the field, then it's a waste of time. So I think it's just leaving egos at the door, and we're all working towards the same thing. There's a lot of continuity. And then when you've had success in the past of doing it, it gives you confidence to your system. And, you just keep running it off, and you get guys plugged in, and, it's nothing magical. It's just the daily work and daily conversations. And over time, guys continue to get a little bit better, a little bit better. And then next thing you know, you look up and, they're completely different player and pitcher or whatever it might be. So, and then just from the whole staff, just having a head coach that prioritizes training, understands the value of the weight room is monumental, and Coach Vaughn's great with that. He believes in it. He supports us. He gives us tons of time and access to go and train our guys, and that ultimately that's all you can ask for, is to have your head coach value what you do, and they're huge supporters, and it makes your job a lot easier when that's the case.
Love that. And you hinted at like when you have those successful collaborative efforts with other coaches, before you know it, it becomes part of your language, right? Hey, this Joe Smith is just like Bob Jones from 4 years
Yeah.
ago. Like, remember
Yeah.
we did him? Let's try that same intervention and see if we get the same outcomes. So, like, I think without realizing it, coaches are always building like their library, their sample size.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely. You see it all the time. I mean, especially when you've been doing it for 8 years, you body types are body types, and you start to see stuff over and over and different things, and you kind of know what works and what you had success with, and then also learn from mistakes you make along the way, and try to clean those up. And, next thing you know, you got a pretty good system intact.
no doubt, man. All right, we always rock a lightning round at the end.
Okay.
I know you're a voracious reader, so I'm going to give you the first two. What's one book that every player should read?
Oh, one book, tough to narrow it down to one, but I'd probably go Slide Edge by Jeff Olson. I don't know if you've read that one. It's a great one. It's basically just kind of focuses on how simple daily disciplines is what moves the needle, kind of how, the theory of compound interest and how that applies to success and achievement. And, the same things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. So, process is a big word in today's game, and focusing on the process, and that's kind of what it is. But you also got to make sure your process is good, and it kind of hints on that. If you focus on your process, but it's a bad process, it can go the other way as well. So I think it's a great book for young guys to learn to develop some routines.
I got to put that on my list and check it out. What's one book that every coach should read? Speaking of coaches who need to read.
Yeah, I went back a little bit on this one. There was one I read a long time ago, right when I got into college after I left you guys down in Florida. It was called Lead for God's Sake, and it was by Todd. I don't want to mispronounce his last name, but Gongwer maybe. But just kind of a refresher for all coaches on what leadership actually is, and what our purpose is to serve and not personal validation and stuff like that. So just a good reminder of kind of why you get into coaching,
Yeah,
why you get into doing this to impact young people and make their lives better.
nice. What's speaking of CSP internships? It was fall of 15, right? I'm dating myself a little bit. It was around that time. I remember your class.
That's
You
right.
played a lot of beach volleyball in that internship. That was
Yeah, yeah.
we're very young. But what was your biggest takeaway from your internship?
Man, honestly, Eric, that's hard to narrow down to one thing. The whole process. I was at a point in my career where I kind of fell into strength conditioning as a grad assistant, and once I was like, all right, this is what I'm doing for a living. I got to go find some people that are really good at it and go learn from them, and that's where I came across CSP, and Shane McCain got me hooked up with Tim, and next thing you know, I'm getting the interview, and here we go. We're taking off. We're down there, and just the whole experience from the obviously the training interventions and assessment program, all that stuff was top notch and state of the art and everything I thought it would be. But then how to take care of a facility and learning different things and how to communicate differently and learning different verbiage, just all of it, and the people and how you guys ran the business, just all of it was very rewarding for me.
Appreciate you saying that, man. We loved having you. You were a stud, one of the best ever. All right, last question, probably the most important one. So we get a lot of kids and parents that listen to this podcast together, right? On the ride home from practice or on the way to a weekend tournament, whatever it is. If you could give a bit of advice to both the kids and the parents, they can be separate bits, what would it be?
Oh man. For the kid, I would say, like do your habits and your goals line up. Like do your daily habits line up with the goals that you've written down. One of my favorite ways to say it is it's hard to have uphill dreams and downhill habits. So, kind of evaluating that process, making sure that, what you say you want to do is lining up with what you're actually doing, and checking yourself on that daily and kind of holding yourself accountable. And then to the parents, I would say, just providing perspective, especially for kids that end up playing at this level, giving them a framework to, not only continue to push them to be the best that they can be, but also teaching them a little bit. I feel like performance anxiety and some of those things are at an all-time high and across the board in all sports, but some of that's expectations that are placed on the kids for different reasons, some created by, all the new environment, but also, dealing with failure for the first time. A lot of these guys, when they come here, they're, the most elite player their town's ever seen. And you get to a level like this and they're dealing with failure for the first time in their life. And so just understanding that even if there's no challenges right now, that they're eventually coming and providing, not only your kid to be great, but also providing them with a framework for when the storms do come, that they know how to navigate it. They have some good perspective and they can get back to kind of being the player that they know they can be, because they're all going to get challenged at some point, whether it's here or at the next level in the big leagues, whatever it is, it's coming, and just having that framework to be ready to go and attack that when it happens.
That's a good thing to end on. You've been a stud coach for a long time, but also an outstanding guest. So thanks so much for carving out some time, man.
Absolutely appreciate it, Eric.
No sweat. Best of luck to you guys the rest of the fall and into the spring.
Perfect, man. Appreciate it. We'll be in touch.